Deathworlder. Thawne stared out the viewport as the transport shuttle approached Jarkor Space Military Academy. The massive orbital structure glittered against the backdrop of stars, its distinctive hexagonal modules and training domes forming what many species called the Crucible of Warriors. To Thawne, it looked more like an elaborate death trap. She checked her environment suit's readings one more time. Oxygen levels normal, gravity compensators functioning, toxin filters clear. Old habits from Earth died hard. Her homeworld's classification as a Class 12 death world meant that even the most mundane day could turn lethal without proper precautions. The shuttle's atmosphere felt too sterile, too controlled. She missed the unpredictable winds of the Vietnamese highlands where she'd grown up. Attention all new cadets. The ship's AI announced in the standard galactic language. Prepare for docking procedures. Upon arrival, proceed to your designated orientation sectors according to species classification. Thawne sighed. Species classification. Another reminder that she was an outlier here. Humans were among the newest members of the Galactic Concord, barely 50 years into their acceptance. Their homeworld's extreme conditions had forced evolutionary adaptations that most other sentient species found disturbing: dense musculature, heightened adrenal responses, robust immune systems, and most notably, the ability to consume foods that would kill most other sentients. The shuttle docked with a gentle hiss of equalizing pressure. Thawne gathered her meager belongings, the single regulation duffel that contained everything she owned, and joined the line of new cadets filing toward the exit. She immediately noticed the careful spacing other species maintained around her. News traveled fast, and her Deathworlder status had clearly preceded her. "Don't worry," said a voice behind her, the translator implant in her ear converting the clicks and whistles into comprehensible speech. "They're just worried you'll breathe on them and melt their exoskeletons." Thawne turned to find a Zeltree cadet, its crystalline outer shell refracting the shuttle's lights into prismatic patterns. The species' natural armor made them formidable warriors, but their brittle personalities were legendary. "I only melt exoskeletons on special occasions," Thawne replied with a forced smile. "Official Academy policy." The Zeltree's faceted eyes flashed what Thawne had learned to recognize as disdain. "Humor. How primitive. I am Lyra, third brood of House Zelva. You would do well to stay out of my path, Deathworlder." Before Thawne could respond, they were ushered through the airlock and into the vast main atrium of Jarkor Academy. The space soared hundreds of meters upward, with walkways and platforms crisscrossing at various levels. Species from across the known galaxy moved with purpose, some floating, others crawling, many walking on varying numbers of limbs. Holographic signs provided directions in dozens of languages. A tall, spindly figure approached her, its 6 arms moving in precise patterns as it consulted a datapad. The Varian administrator's elongated head bobbed slightly as it spoke. "Human Cadet Van Thawne, classification, Deathworld origin, Class 12, assigned to Dormitory Sector 7G, Specialized Environment Wing." The Varian extended one of its upper limbs, offering a small metallic disc. "Your access key. The Academy systems will recognize your biometrics within 24 standard hours. Until then, use this for all security checkpoints." Thawne accepted the disc with a nod. "Thank you. Can you direct me to the Xenobiology department? I was told to report there after orientation." The Varian's compound eyes blinked in what might have been surprise. "Xenobiology? Unusual specialization for your kind. Most Deathworlders gravitate toward combat training or engineering." "I'm not most Deathworlders," Thawne replied evenly. "Evidently not." The administrator tapped at its datapad. "Xenobiology department is located in Science Sector, Level 23. Dr. Carell is the department head. He has been informed of your arrival." The way the Varian said "informed" suggested that Dr. Carell was less than enthusiastic about having a human in his department. Thawne wasn't surprised. Xenobiologists throughout the Concord viewed humans as dangerous curiosities rather than colleagues. "I'll find my way there after orientation," Thawne said. The Varian nodded and moved on to the next cadet, leaving Thawne to navigate the sprawling academy. She followed the indicators to Dormitory Sector 7G, noting with each step how other cadets created a bubble of space around her. Some species actually altered their routes to avoid crossing her path directly. The Specialized Environment Wing housed cadets whose biological needs differed significantly from the Academy's standard atmosphere. Her room was small but functional. A bed designed to human specifications, a workstation, storage compartments, and a private washroom with actual water facilities, a luxury on a space station. The gravity was set slightly higher than Earth standard, presumably to help maintain her muscle mass. A message waited on her room's terminal. Orientation schedule. Cadet Van Than 0800, General Academy Introduction, Grand Auditorium, 1000, Deathworld Species Safety Protocols, Safety Center, Level 14, 1200, Nutrition Center Registration, 1400, Xenobiology Department. Introduction, Science Sector, Level 23. The Deathworld Species Safety Protocols session was unique to her schedule. Thon was certain. She'd been through similar briefings before. Don't touch anything without gloves. Avoid physical contact with non-Deathworlders. Use specially designated facilities. Report any injuries immediately regardless of severity. She unpacked her few possessions, placing a small, worn photograph beside her bed, her family standing before their mountain home on Earth, the rice terraces stretching into the distance. Her parents had been skeptical of her decision to join the academy. "Why go where you're feared?" her father had asked. Her mother had been more understanding. Sometimes being feared is better than being ignored. Thon checked her environment suit once more, even though the room's atmosphere was calibrated for her physiology. Then she stepped back into the corridor and headed toward the grand auditorium for her first step into a world that viewed her very existence as a biological hazard. The auditorium was designed to accommodate species of wildly varying sizes and environmental needs. Thon found herself directed to a section marked for oxygen breathers, standard gravity, non-aquatic. Even within this grouping, she noticed a distinct gap around her seat. Academy Commandant Zorvak, a massive Draken whose scaled body stretched nearly 4 meters, addressed the gathered cadets from a central platform. His species was among the few that didn't seem particularly concerned about humans, probably because Draken homeworlds were classified as Deathworlds themselves, though only Class 8. "You have been selected from thousands of applicants across the Concord." His rumbling voice echoed through the chamber. "Each of you brings unique adaptations and perspectives. Together, you represent the future of our United Defense Forces." His yellow eyes swept across the gathering, pausing briefly on Thon. "Some of you come from worlds that others would find uninhabitable. Some possess natural abilities that others might find alarming. At Jarkor, these differences are assets, not liabilities, provided they are properly controlled." The emphasis on control wasn't subtle. Thon kept her expression neutral as the Commandant continued outlining the Academy's expectations, regulations, and consequences for violations. The rules were extensive, with specific subsections for different species classifications. After the general introduction, Thon made her way to the safety center for her special briefing. The instructor, a Meditech specialist with translucent skin revealing complex internal organs, seemed nervous to be alone with her. "Cadet Thon, I am Specialist Ixel. I'll be reviewing the safety protocols specific to your biology." The Meditech kept a workstation between them at all times. "Please understand these measures are for everyone's protection, including your own." Thon nodded. "I've been through similar briefings before." "Yes, well, Academy protocols are particularly stringent." Ixel activated a holographic display showing a human silhouette. "Your species possesses several traits of concern." The briefing lasted nearly 2 hours, covering everything from the acids in her digestive system to the dangerously efficient oxygen processing of her lungs. Thon was issued special meal cards, exercise schedules designed to safely vent her excessive energy, and emergency contact protocols. And, of course, Ixel concluded, absolutely no physical combat practice with non-Deathworld species without supervisory staff present. Your natural strength and resilience could cause serious injuries. "I understand," Thon said, keeping her voice level. "Is there anything else?" The Meditech hesitated. "There is the matter of your emotional responses. Human adrenaline surges can trigger unpredictable behaviors. You must report any feelings of anger, fear, or excessive excitement immediately. Report my feelings? Thon raised an eyebrow. To whom? Your department supervisor or any security officer? Ixel seemed uncomfortable with her questioning. It's standard procedure for all Deathworld species. Thon doubted that was true but didn't argue. Understood. May I go now? After a quick stop at the nutrition center to register her dietary needs, which prompted another round of warnings about human digestive capabilities, Thon headed toward the science sector for her department introduction. With each step, her determination hardened. She would prove herself through competence and control, showing that humans could be more than just dangerous curiosities. The xenobiology department occupied 3 full levels of the science sector, with specialized labs, containment facilities, and observation chambers. Thon's access key directed her to Laboratory 23C, where several other cadets had already gathered. Dr. Carroll stood at the front of the lab, his elongated insectoid head swiveling as he lectured. The Arcturian xenobiologist was renowned for his work with dangerous species, and for his outspoken skepticism about human integration into the Concord. Ah, he said as Thon entered, his mandibles clicking. Our Deathworlder arrives. How fitting that you should study with us. Cadet Thon. The observer becomes the observed. Several of the cadets chittered with laughter, most noticeably a group of Zeltri that included Lyra from the shuttle. Thon met Carell's compound eyes steadily. I'm here to learn. Dr. Carroll, not to be studied. Are you? The xenobiologist's antennae twitched. Yet you must acknowledge the irony. Humans evolved on a planet so hostile that most sentient species would perish within minutes of exposure. Your biology is a testament to adaptation under extreme selective pressure. He gestured toward a holographic display showing Earth's environmental statistics, atmospheric composition, gravity, temperature ranges, radiation levels, pathogen diversity. A planet where liquid water falls from the sky, where microscopic organisms wage constant war on larger life forms, where temperature fluctuations of 50 degrees can occur in a single location. Fascinating, truly. Thon had heard it all before. Earth wasn't even the most extreme death world in the Concord, just the only one that had produced a spacefaring civilization. With respect, Doctor, I'm familiar with my homeworld's classification. I'd prefer to focus on the curriculum. Carell's mandibles clicked rapidly, the Arcturian equivalent of a dismissive snort. Very well. As I was explaining before our special cadet arrived, this term's practical studies will focus on predator-prey relationships across gravity and atmospheric gradients. We will be working with live specimens, so attention to containment protocols is essential. He activated another display, showing the term's schedule. Our first practical session will be 3 days from now. We will be examining a Seraxian drake, a mid-level predator from Serax Prime. Murmurs rippled through the gathered cadets. Seraxian drakes were notorious for their aggressive hunting behaviors and poisonous spines. Even among experienced xenobiologists, they were considered challenging subjects. A senior researcher will oversee the session. Carell continued. But we will need a cadet to serve as primary observer. The role requires maintaining proximity to the specimen while recording behavioral responses. His compound eyes fixed on Thon. Since our human cadet is so eager to be treated like any other student, perhaps she would volunteer? After all, your species' legendary resilience should provide some margin for error. It was a trap, and Thon knew it. Refuse, and she'd confirm the stereotype that humans talked boldly but retreated when challenged. Accept, and she'd be placing herself in genuine danger to satisfy Carell's obvious desire to see her fail, or worse. She met his gaze again. I'll do it. Carell's antennae quivered with what might have been surprise, or anticipation. Excellent. I look forward to observing your technique. As the session concluded and cadets filed out, Lyra and 2 other Zeltri blocked Thon's path. Their crystalline forms refracted the laboratory lights in dazzling patterns that might have been beautiful if not for the malice behind them. Quite brave, Deathworlder, Lyra said. Or perhaps just stupid. Seraxian drakes have been known to sense fear. I wonder what they'll make of yours. I'm not afraid of the drake, Thon replied calmly. Or of you. You should be. One of the other Zeltri said, its voice translating as jagged and harsh. Dr. Carroll has lost 2 research assistants to specimen accidents. Both were from resilient species. Thon stepped forward, and the Zeltree instinctively backed away, their ingrained fear of Deathworlders overriding their desire to intimidate. Then I'll be careful not to become the third, excuse me. She pushed past them and headed back to her quarters, mind racing. She had 3 days to learn everything she could about Syraxian drakes and prepare for whatever Carell had planned. The Academy library would have records, and perhaps she could access the containment protocols for the specimen. As she walked, Thon noticed a small group of cadets watching her from a distance, not with the usual fear or disdain, but with curiosity. One of them, a Solarian with luminous skin that pulsed with gentle light, gave her a subtle nod of acknowledgement. Maybe not everyone at Jarkor saw her as just a dangerous anomaly. That small gesture gave Thon hope as she prepared to face her first real challenge at the Academy, a challenge that would either prove her worth or confirm every prejudice against her kind. The 3 days before the Syraxian Drake demonstration passed in a blur of preparation. Thon spent every spare moment in the Academy's information center, absorbing everything she could find about the predatory species. The data painted a concerning picture. Syraxian drakes were pack hunters on their native world, using coordinated attacks to bring down prey much larger than themselves. In isolation, they became unpredictable, sometimes turning their aggression inward, sometimes becoming hyper-focused on any potential threat. The library's environmental simulator allowed her to experience a virtual recreation of Serax Prime, a world with slightly lower gravity than Earth, but a denser atmosphere rich in sulfur compounds. The Drake's natural hunting grounds were rocky highlands where visibility was often poor due to constant volcanic activity. They relied heavily on heat sensing and olfactory cues rather than vision. On the morning of the demonstration, Thon arrived at the xenobiology lab early. She wasn't surprised to find Dr. Carroll already there, making adjustments to the containment field. Cadet Thon, he acknowledged without looking up. Prompt. At least one human trait that aligns with Academy values? Thon ignored the barb. I've been studying Syraxian drakes, Doctor. They're pack hunters that become highly stressed in isolation. Has this specimen been properly socialized? Carell's antennae twitched. You question my preparation? This drake has been in Academy possession for 16 standard cycles. Its behaviors have been thoroughly documented. With respect, I'm not questioning your expertise. I'm trying to understand what to expect. The xenobiologist finally turned to face her. What you should expect, Cadet, is to follow instructions precisely. The drake will be partially sedated and contained within a Class 3 energy barrier. Your task is to observe and record its responses to various stimuli, nothing more. Other cadets began filing into the laboratory, including Lyra and her Zeltree companions. They took positions at observation stations around the central containment area, a circular platform surrounded by monitoring equipment and protected by the shimmering field Carell had mentioned. Today's demonstration. Carell announced once everyone was present. We'll showcase predatory responses in controlled conditions. Cadet Thon will serve as primary observer, positioned within the outer containment field. He activated a display showing a schematic of the containment system. The specimen is secured by 2 barriers, an inner field that prevents physical contact and an outer field that allows limited interaction while maintaining safety. Cadet Thon will remain between these barriers, equipped with standard recording implements. The doctor turned to Thon. You will follow a precise protocol. Any deviation could compromise containment. Are you prepared? Thon nodded, though her instincts were screaming caution. Something felt off about the entire setup, but she couldn't identify what. I'm ready. Then let us proceed. Carell activated a sequence on the control panel, and a section of the laboratory floor slid open. From the opening rose a transparent cylinder containing the Syraxian drake. The creature was smaller than Thon had expected, about the size of a large earth feline, but its predatory nature was unmistakable. Ridged scales covered its 6-limbed body, transitioning to sharp spines along its back and tail. Its elongated head housed multiple sensory pits and a jaw that could unhinge to swallow prey whole. The drake paced the confines of its container, movements jerky and agitated. Its scales shifted color rapidly, flashing patterns of red and orange that Thon recognized from her research as stress indicators. "The specimen appears distressed," she noted, loud enough for Carell to hear. "Noted. Cadet, please take your position." A section of the outer field shimmered and parted, creating an entrance. Thon stepped through, and the field resealed behind her. She now stood in the narrow space between the two containment barriers, close enough to the Drake to observe it in detail but supposedly protected from physical contact. "Begin recording sequence alpha," Carell instructed. "Note initial behaviors without stimulus." Thon activated the recording device she'd been given, documenting the Drake's movements and vocalizations, a series of low hisses and clicks that echoed in the confined space. The creature became increasingly focused on her presence, its sensory pits dilating as it tracked her movements. "The Drake is displaying territorial awareness," she reported. "Its color patterns suggest elevated stress levels, and its sensory orientation indicates it's identified me as a potential threat." "Proceed to sequence beta," Carell said. "Introduce thermal stimulus." A small panel on the floor of the Drake's containment area began to heat, creating a temperature gradient. According to protocol, this should cause the Drake to move toward or away from the heat, depending on its current thermoregulatory needs. Instead, the creature's attention remained fixed on Thon. Its scales rippled from orange to deep crimson, a warning coloration she hadn't encountered in her research. "Doctor, the specimen is not responding to the thermal stimulus," Thon said, keeping her voice calm despite her growing concern. "It appears to be focusing exclusively on my presence." "Continue observation," Carell replied. "The specimen may require time to notice the temperature change." Thon moved slowly around the perimeter of the containment field, and the Drake followed her movement precisely, its body low to the ground in what she recognized as a stalking posture. Its tail lashed back and forth, another hunting behavior. "The Drake is displaying predatory tracking behaviors," she reported. "I recommend pausing the demonstration until it shows less fixation." Before Carell could respond, Lyra's voice cut in. "Perhaps it senses the Deathworlder's fear? I thought humans were supposed to be apex predators on their world." Several cadets laughed, and Thon noticed the Drake's head swivel toward the sound, its sensory pits flaring wider. The creature's muscles tensed visibly. "Additional auditory stimuli are agitating the specimen," Thon warned. "Please maintain silence during the observation." "Proceed to sequence gamma," Carell said, ignoring her concern. "Introduce prey facsimile." A small, robot-like device emerged from the floor of the Drake's containment area, moving in patterns that mimicked potential prey. This was intended to trigger hunting behaviors that the cadets could observe and analyze. The Drake glanced at the device briefly, then returned its attention to Thon. It began making a new sound, a rapid clicking that vibrated the air. "Doctor, the specimen is ignoring the prey facsimile," Thon said, her unease growing. "It's vocalizing in a pattern I don't recognize from the research materials." "Fascinating," Carell replied, and something in his tone made Thon suspect this wasn't an unexpected development. Perhaps it recognizes a more interesting potential prey. The Drake suddenly lunged toward the inner containment field, slamming against the energy barrier that separated it from Thon. The field rippled but held, and the creature rebounded, hissing furiously. "The specimen is testing the containment," Thon reported, maintaining her composure despite the clear threat display. "I recommend increasing field strength." "Unnecessary," Carell said. "The fields are designed to withstand forces much greater than a Syraxian Drake can generate. Continue observation." The Drake began circling its enclosure, eyes never leaving Thon, occasionally charging the barrier and recoiling. Each impact seemed to make the energy field fluctuate more noticeably. "Something's wrong with the containment field," Thon said, unable to keep the urgency from her voice. "It's not maintaining consistent resistance." Carell checked his instruments. "Readings show normal operation. Complete the observation protocol. Cadet." Thon knew better than to argue further, but she also recognized genuine danger when she saw it. The Drake wasn't behaving like a specimen under observation. It was behaving like a predator that had identified prey and was methodically testing defenses. She continued recording observations while maintaining maximum distance from the inner barrier, tracking the Drake's increasingly coordinated attempts to breach the field. The creature was learning from each impact, adjusting its approach, targeting what appeared to be weaker points in the energy matrix. The specimen is demonstrating problem-solving behaviors consistent with higher cognitive function than documented. She noted for the record, its attacks on the barrier appear strategic rather than instinctual. Just as she finished speaking, the drake reared back on its hind limbs and extended concealed appendages from beneath its scale ridges, specialized sensory tendrils that it pressed against the energy field. The barrier visibly wavered where the tendrils made contact. "Emergency protocol recommended," Thon said sharply. "The specimen is manipulating the field frequency with its sensory appendages." "Impossible," Carell dismissed. "Syraxian drakes do not possess the neural capacity for such—" His statement was cut short by a crackling sound as the inner containment field destabilized. The drake immediately launched itself through the failing barrier, directly toward Thon. Years of training on Earth's hostile terrain took over. Thon dropped and rolled as the drake sailed over her, its venomous spines missing her by centimeters. She came up in a defensive crouch, facing the predator that now shared the narrow space between barriers with her. The laboratory erupted in chaos. Cadets backed away from their observation stations, and Carell frantically worked the control panel. "Outer field disengaging in 3 seconds," his voice announced over the commotion. "Cadet Thon, move to exit point Alpha immediately." The drake, recovering from its missed attack, oriented on Thon again. Its scales now pulsed with a hunting pattern she recognized from her research, the coloration used when closing in for a kill. Thon knew she wouldn't make it to the exit point before the creature attacked again. Instead of retreating, she did the one thing her instructors on Earth had taught her when facing a predator without weapons. She stood her ground and made herself appear larger. Drawing herself to her full height, she spread her arms wide and locked eyes with the drake. "Hold!" she commanded in a voice that cut through the panic in the lab. The drake paused, its sensory pits dilating. This wasn't a behavior it had encountered before, prey that neither fled nor attacked, but challenged. "Cadet Thon, proceed to the exit now," Carell ordered. "If I move, it attacks," Thon replied without breaking eye contact with the drake. "Cancel the field deactivation." For a tense moment, human and alien predator measured each other. Then, slowly, Thon began to lower her stance, keeping her movements deliberate and non-threatening. The drake's color patterns shifted again, orange fading into a cautious yellow. "It's responding to dominance signaling," Thon said quietly. "Don't anyone make sudden movements or loud noises." She gradually settled into a kneeling position, making herself smaller but maintaining eye contact. The drake watched her, its head tilting in what seemed like curiosity. "Fascinating," Carell murmured from beyond the barrier. "It's treating her as a rival predator, not prey." Thon slowly extended one hand, palm down, in the direction of the drake, not reaching for it, but offering a scent point. The creature's sensory pits flared as it detected her unique human biochemistry. "Syraxian drakes have excellent chemoreceptors," she said softly. "I'm letting it identify me as something unfamiliar but non-threatening." The drake took a tentative step forward, then another. The laboratory had fallen silent, every cadet and instructor watching the unprecedented interaction. When the creature was less than a meter away, it extended its own sensory tendrils, the same appendages it had used to disrupt the energy field. Thon remained perfectly still as the tendrils wavered near her outstretched hand, sensing her body chemistry, her heat signature, the subtle electrical field generated by her nervous system. "It's cataloging me," she explained, her voice barely above a whisper. "Learning that I'm not prey, not threat, not pack, something new." After what seemed like an eternity, the drake retracted its tendrils and settled into a resting posture, its scales shifting to a neutral blue-gray. It maintained a watchful stance but no longer displayed aggression. "Dr. Carell," Thon said, still not moving. "I believe we can re-establish containment now, but it needs to be done gradually. Sudden energy fluctuations might trigger a defensive response." For once, the xenobiologist didn't argue. "Implementing staged containment recovery," he confirmed. "Remain stationary, cadet." A new energy field began to form around the drake, different from the previous barrier, a gentle, spherical containment that gradually contracted around the creature. The drake noticed the field but didn't react aggressively, seemingly accepting this new development as non-threatening. Containment stable, Carell announced after several tense minutes. Preparing to extract the specimen. A section of the floor opened again, and the containment sphere with the Drake inside slowly descended. Before it disappeared completely, the creature turned its head toward Thon one last time, its sensory pits dilating in what she somehow knew was recognition. When the floor sealed and the outer containment field finally deactivated, Thon exhaled deeply, only now realizing how tightly wound her muscles had been. The laboratory remained silent for several moments before erupting in excited chatter. Carell approached her, mandibles working in what might have been agitation or excitement. Your methods were unorthodox, Cadet Thon, but undeniably effective. How did you know the Drake would respond to dominance signaling? Thon met his compound eyes. I didn't. But on Earth, predators often recognize other predators through behavioral cues. Prey runs, predators challenge. And you chose to present yourself as a predator. It wasn't a question. I am a predator, Dr. Carell. Thon said simply, by your own classification standards, humans evolved as pursuit predators on a death world. The Drake recognized what you and many others here seem to forget. We're not dangerous because we're alien. We're dangerous because we survived a world that demanded it. For the first time since she'd arrived at the academy, Carell's antennae dipped in what Thon recognized as a gesture of respect. It seems I have underestimated both your species and your individual capabilities. Cadet. This bears further investigation. As the other cadets filed out, still discussing the unprecedented demonstration, Lyra approached Thon. The Zeltree's crystalline form seemed less harsh somehow, its facets catching the light differently. That was unexpected. Lyra said, you faced the Drake without weapons or technology. Sometimes the best technology is understanding, Thon replied. Lyra's faceted eyes flickered. Perhaps there is more to learn from Deathworlders than we have acknowledged. Until next session, Cadet Thon. It wasn't friendship. Not yet. But it was a beginning. As Thon headed back to her quarters to document her observations, she felt something she hadn't experienced since arriving at Jarkor, a sense of possibility. Perhaps there was a place for humans in the Conquered after all, not despite their Deathworld origins, but because of them. The Academy's response to the Drake incident was swift and unexpected. Instead of being reprimanded for deviating from protocol, Thon was summoned to meet with Dr. Carell and Academy Commandant Zorvak the following morning. She arrived at the Commandant's office uncertain whether to expect commendation or expulsion. Cadet Thon. Zorvak greeted her, his massive scaled form dwarfing the furniture designed for smaller species. Your handling of yesterday's incident has generated considerable discussion among the faculty. Discussion and controversy. Carell added, his antennae twitching. Your methods violated numerous safety protocols. Thon stood at attention. I responded to an emergency situation using the training available to me, sir. The containment failure put everyone at risk. Indeed. Zorvak's reptilian eyes narrowed. Dr. Carell has reviewed the sensor logs. It appears the inner containment field was improperly calibrated. An investigation is underway to determine whether this was negligence or intentional sabotage. Thon kept her expression neutral, though she had her suspicions. Carell's eagerness to place her in the observation role and his dismissal of her safety concerns suggested the accident might have been engineered to test or discredit the human cadet. More relevant to this meeting, the Commandant continued, is your unprecedented rapport with the Syraxian Drake. Dr. Carell believes this warrants further exploration. Carell's mandibles clicked rapidly. The specimen has been under Academy supervision for 16 cycles, yet has never shown the behavioral adaptability it displayed yesterday. Your interaction suggests possibilities we hadn't considered. What kind of possibilities? Thon asked cautiously. Training, not just containment. Zorvak said, the Concord encounters many dangerous species during expansion and exploration. Our standard approach has been isolation or, when necessary, elimination. Your demonstration suggests alternatives. Thon felt a glimmer of hope. You want me to work with the Drake? Under strict supervision. Carell stipulated, "We are establishing a modified research protocol that will allow you to continue interactions with the specimen in a controlled environment." "This is not without risk," Zorvac warned. "The drake remains a deadly predator, regardless of its response to you. But if successful, this research could establish new approaches to xenobiological management, and perhaps demonstrate additional values that Deathworld species bring to the conquered." "I understand the risks," Thon said, "and I'm willing to accept them." Then it settled. The Commandant activated his datapad. "Your schedule has been adjusted to include specialized research sessions with Dr. Carell. Your regular coursework will continue, but with this additional focus." As Thon left the meeting, she couldn't help but feel that everything had changed. What had begun as a demonstration designed to humiliate her had instead opened a door to something unprecedented. For the first time since arriving at Jarkor, she felt not just tolerated, but valued for the very adaptations that had marked her as an outsider. The specialized research sessions began that same afternoon. A dedicated laboratory had been prepared with enhanced monitoring systems and multiple redundant containment options. The Syraxian Drake, now designated Subject SD-17, was already present in a modified habitat enclosure when Thon arrived. "We've made several adjustments based on yesterday's observations," Carell explained as he guided her through the new protocols. "The containment system now incorporates graduated responses rather than binary fields, and we've installed additional safeguards that can be activated instantly if necessary." Thon noticed that despite the talk of safety, the basic setup still required her to be in proximity to the Drake with only minimal barriers. "You're really committed to this research direction." "The incident has revised certain assumptions," Carell admitted. "Your handling of the Drake suggests that Deathworld adaptations include more than just physical resilience. The behavioral intuition you demonstrated is particularly noteworthy." "It wasn't intuition," Thon corrected. "It was education. On Earth, understanding predator psychology is basic survival training." Carell's antennae twitched in what Thon had come to recognize as surprise. "You were formally trained in predator management?" "Everyone in my region is," she explained. "The Vietnamese highlands still have large predators, tigers, leopards, bears. We're taught from childhood how to recognize and respond to predatory behavior patterns." "Fascinating." Carell made notes on his datapad. "And you believe these Earth-based principles can be applied to extraterrestrial predators?" "The specific behaviors differ, but the underlying drives are often similar." Thon said, "Territory, dominance, resource competition, threat assessment, these are universal concepts for predatory species." Carell gestured toward the Drake, which had been watching their interaction with evident interest. "Then let us see if your Earth wisdom extends to Syraxian predators. Today's session will focus on establishing consistent response patterns." Over the next several hours, Thon worked methodically with the Drake, beginning with simple proximity exercises. She maintained the dominant posture that had worked previously, gradually introducing variations to gauge the creature's understanding. The Drake proved remarkably adaptive. It quickly learned to associate specific hand gestures with behaviors, backing away, approaching, remaining still. By the end of the session, Thon had established a rudimentary communication system based on movement and positioning. "It's using its sensory tendrils to monitor my biochemical state," she explained to Carell as they reviewed the session data. "I think it can detect subtle changes in my respiration and perspiration that indicate intention. That would explain its heightened response to your commands." Carell agreed. Syraxian drakes evolved to hunt in packs, using chemical signaling to coordinate attacks. It may be interpreting your biochemical cues as similar signals. "Not just interpreting," Than suggested. "Learning. It's adapting its responses based on outcomes. That suggests higher cognitive function than your previous research indicated." "Indeed." Carell's compound eyes fixed on her, which raises questions about why it never displayed such capabilities before. Thon considered this as she prepared for the next day's session. Perhaps the Drake had never been given the opportunity to demonstrate intelligence. If it had been treated purely as a dangerous specimen, rather than a sentient being with its own motivations and capacities, it might have responded accordingly, becoming the mindless threat its handlers expected. The following weeks saw remarkable progress. Thawne expanded her work with the Drake to include more complex interactions, retrieving objects, navigating obstacles, distinguishing between targets. Each session revealed new aspects of the creature's intelligence and adaptability. News of the unusual research spread throughout the Academy. Other cadets began requesting permission to observe the sessions, and Karel reluctantly allowed small groups to attend under strict conditions. Lyra and several other Zeltri were among the most frequent observers, their initial disdain gradually transforming into genuine interest. "How do you maintain its focus?" Lyra asked after one particularly successful demonstration where the Drake had successfully completed a complex sequence of actions based on Thawne's gestural commands. "Mutual respect," Thawne answered. "I don't treat it as just a specimen or a weapon. It's a thinking being with its own motivations and needs." "But it's a predator." Another cadet objected. "Its primary motivation is to hunt and kill." "That's a simplification," Thawne said. "Even on Earth, predators spend relatively little time actually hunting. They seek security, comfort, stimulation, social connection, many of the same things we do." "You speak of it almost as a person," Lyra noted. "Person is a limited concept." Thawne replied, "The Drake is intelligent in ways that don't match our definition of personhood, but that doesn't make its intelligence less real or valuable." As the research continued, Thawne began to notice subtle changes in how she was treated by other cadets and instructors. The bubble of space that had surrounded her in corridors gradually diminished. Conversations in the dining hall no longer halted when she approached. Some cadets even began seeking her expertise on other xenobiological questions. Dr. Karel, too, had evolved in his approach. His initial skepticism had given way to genuine scientific curiosity. He still maintained strict protocols, but increasingly deferred to Thawne's insights regarding the Drake's behavior and capabilities. "We should consider expanding the research parameters," he suggested after reviewing a month's worth of data. "The Drake has mastered all the challenges we've presented within the laboratory setting. Perhaps field tests would yield new insights." "Field tests?" Thawne questioned. "You mean outside the containment area?" "Precisely. A controlled environment within the Academy grounds, but less structured than the laboratory. It would allow us to observe how the Drake applies its learned behaviors in a more complex setting." The proposal was both exciting and concerning. Thawne had developed a strong rapport with the Drake, now nicknamed Sarai after a legendary Earth predator. But she remained acutely aware of its lethal capabilities. Outside the laboratory's safeguards, those capabilities posed genuine risks. "What kind of safety measures would be in place?" she asked. "Multiple redundancies," Karel assured her. "Remote containment fields, sedation protocols if necessary, and a security detail with non-lethal suppression equipment. Your safety is paramount." "I'm not concerned about my safety," Thawne clarified. "I'm concerned about Sarai's. If something goes wrong and she responds defensively, the security team might use excessive force." Karel's antennae twitched. "You've developed quite an attachment to the specimen." "I've developed respect for her capabilities and potential," Thawne corrected. "Harming her would be both ethically questionable and scientifically wasteful." After extensive planning and approval from Academy Command, the field test was scheduled for the following week. A section of the Academy's environmental training grounds would be adapted to simulate Saraxian terrain, providing a familiar setting for the Drake while allowing observation of new behaviors. The evening before the test, Thawne visited the laboratory for additional preparation. Sarai greeted her with the now familiar display of recognition, a specific color pattern that rippled across her scales when Thawne entered. "Tomorrow's going to be different," Thawne told the Drake as she checked the transport container and monitoring equipment. "New places, new challenges, but I'll be with you the whole time." Whether Sarai understood the words was debatable, but she responded to Thawne's tone and posture, settling into a relaxed stance that conveyed trust, a remarkable development for a creature that had been considered unmanageably dangerous just months ago. As Thawne completed her preparations, Lyra entered the laboratory. The Zeltri had become a regular presence during the research sessions, gradually transitioning from skeptical observer to interested assistant. "The security preparations are complete," Lyra reported. Environmental controls are calibrated to maintain optimal conditions for the Drake. Is there anything else required? I think we're as ready as we can be, Thon replied. But I'm still concerned about how Sarai will react to the security personnel. She's never encountered armed individuals before. Lyra's crystalline form refracted the laboratory lights as she moved closer to the containment area. I've been authorized to inform you that the security detail has been modified based on your concerns. Dr. Carell specifically requested officers with xenobiological training rather than standard security forces. That's unexpected, Thon admitted. I didn't think he'd take my concerns so seriously. Your results have earned his respect, Lyra said. And not just his. Many at the Academy are reconsidering their assumptions about Deathworlders, and about the potential for communication with species previously dismissed as merely dangerous. The field test dawned with nervous anticipation. The environmental training grounds had been transformed into a reasonable facsimile of Saraxian highlands, complete with rocky outcroppings, thermal vents, and the sulfurous atmosphere the Drake was accustomed to. Observation platforms surrounded the area, filled with Academy staff and select cadets eager to witness the unprecedented demonstration. Thon stood at the entry point, dressed in a modified environment suit that would protect her from the sulfurous atmosphere while allowing maximum mobility. Sarai was already in the training ground, having been transported while sedated to minimize stress. Remember the protocols, Carell instructed as final preparations were completed. Maintain visual contact at all times. The Drake may exhibit unpredicted behaviors in this new environment. If at any point you feel endangered, give the withdrawal signal and the containment fields will activate immediately. Thon nodded, focusing on controlling her respiration and heart rate. Sarai had become sensitive to her physiological cues and would detect any anxiety or fear. I'm ready, she said. The airlock cycled, and Thon stepped into the Saraxian environment. The gravity felt slightly lighter than Earth standard, and the yellowish atmosphere created an otherworldly glow. She spotted Sarai immediately. The Drake had taken position on a high rock formation, surveying the unfamiliar territory. Thon raised her hand in the greeting gesture they had established, and Sarai's scales rippled in recognition. The Drake descended from her perch with fluid grace, approaching at a measured pace that demonstrated her training. Good morning, Sarai, Thon said, knowing the Drake responded more to her tone than the words themselves. Ready to explore? She began the planned exercises, using hand signals to direct Sarai through a series of navigational challenges. The Drake performed flawlessly, demonstrating not just obedience but problem-solving abilities as she encountered obstacles and adapted her approach. From the observation platform, Carell provided commentary for the assembled audience, explaining the significance of each behavior and the training methodologies Thon had developed. The atmosphere among the observers shifted from tense anticipation to genuine amazement as the demonstration progressed. The Drake is now operating independently within defined parameters, Carell explained as Sarai navigated a complex terrain feature without direct guidance. It has internalized the boundaries established during training and is making autonomous decisions within those constraints, a capability previously thought impossible for this species. Thon monitored Sarai's progress with pride. The Drake had exceeded every expectation, showing not just compliance but initiative and judgment. As they moved to the final phase of the demonstration, a simulated hunting exercise using mechanical prey analogs, Thon felt confident that they had achieved something truly groundbreaking. Then everything went wrong. A power fluctuation rippled through the training ground systems, causing the atmospheric processors to surge. Alarms blared, and the sulfur content of the air briefly spiked to levels toxic even for Saraxian biology. Sarai reacted instantly, her scales flashing distress patterns as the caustic atmosphere burned her sensitive respiratory membranes. She let out a piercing cry that Thon had never heard before, a sound of pure pain and fear. "System malfunction," Carell's voice announced over the communication channel. "Preparing emergency extraction." Containment fields began to materialize around the perimeter of the training ground, designed to herd both Thon and Sarai toward the extraction point. But the Drake, disoriented and in pain, perceived the advancing energy fields as threats. She retreated from them, moving deeper into the training ground rather than toward the exit. Abort the containment procedure, Thon shouted into her communicator. It's driving her into a defensive state. The atmospheric contamination is reaching critical levels. Carell responded, You must evacuate immediately. Thon made a split-second decision. Instead of moving toward the extraction point, she pursued Sarai, who had taken refuge in a rock formation far from the exit. The drake's scales were now pulsing rapid patterns of distress and aggression, a dangerous combination. I need to calm her first, Thon insisted. If you try to force extraction, she'll attack. As she approached Sarai's position, Thon could see the effects of the atmospheric contamination. The drake's eyes were clouded, and her breathing came in harsh gasps. When she spotted Thon, her posture shifted to a pre-attack stance, sensory pits dilated in confusion. Sarai, it's me, Thon said, keeping her voice steady despite the burning in her own lungs. Her environment suit's filters were struggling with the contaminated atmosphere. We need to leave, now. The drake hissed, extending her defensive spines, a clear warning. In her pain and confusion, she had reverted to instinctual behaviors, perceiving everything as a potential threat. Thon knew she had seconds to reconnect with the drake before the situation deteriorated beyond recovery. Drawing on everything she had learned about Syraxian psychology, she made a calculated risk. She removed her helmet. The unfiltered Syraxian atmosphere hit her like a physical blow, caustic compounds burning her eyes and throat. But the gesture achieved its purpose. Sarai could now detect Thon's natural scent, the biochemical signature that had become associated with safety and cooperation. Cadet Thon, Carell's voice crackled over the communicator she still wore. Replace your helmet immediately. The atmosphere is lethal to human physiology. Thon ignored him, focusing entirely on Sarai. Through watering eyes, she maintained eye contact with the drake, extending her hand in the familiar gesture of connection. Her lungs screamed for clean air, but she forced herself to move slowly, deliberately, projecting calm despite her body's panic. For an agonizing moment, Sarai remained in her defensive posture, sensory tendrils extended and quivering with indecision. Then, gradually, her spines began to retract. Recognition flickered in her clouded eyes. That's it, Thon encouraged, her voice raspy from the corrosive atmosphere. It's me. We're leaving together. Step by careful step. She approached until she stood within reach of the drake's natural weapons. Then, in a move that drew gasps from the observation platforms, she knelt and pressed her forehead against Sarai's scaled head, a gesture of absolute trust. The drake went completely still. Then, slowly, her scales shifted from aggressive red to the calm blue-gray of acceptance. When Thon rose and began moving toward the extraction point, Sarai followed without hesitation. As they reached the airlock, emergency medical personnel rushed forward. Thon replaced her helmet, gulping the clean air with desperate relief as the outer door sealed behind them. Sarai, still following her lead, allowed the waiting technicians to approach with respiratory treatment devices. Reckless, Carell declared as he burst into the decontamination chamber, mandibles clicking in agitation. Absolutely reckless. Cadet Thon, you could have been killed. Thon, still coughing as her lungs cleared, managed a weak smile. But effective, Doctor. Sometimes trust has to be demonstrated, not just expected. As medical staff treated both human and drake for exposure to the contaminated atmosphere, news of what had happened spread rapidly through the academy. The power fluctuation was quickly identified as a genuine malfunction rather than sabotage, but the response, particularly Thon's decision to remove her helmet, became the subject of intense discussion. By the time Thon was released from the medical center the following day, the incident had transformed from a near disaster into something approaching legend. Cadets she had never spoken to greeted her in the corridors. Instructors who had previously viewed her with suspicion now acknowledged her with respect. Academy Commandant Zorvac summoned her for a formal review, which she expected to include a reprimand for violating safety protocols. Instead, she found herself facing not just the Commandant but a panel of senior officers from various Concord departments. Cadet Thon, Zorvac began, his reptilian features unreadable. Your actions during yesterday's incident have been thoroughly reviewed. The removal of protective equipment in a hostile environment constitutes a severe breach of standard procedures. Thon stood at attention, prepared to accept whatever consequences followed. However, the Commandant continued, the circumstances were exceptional, and your judgment, while unorthodox, proved effective. The Drake has made a full recovery, and the training relationship you established remained intact despite extreme stress factors. One of the other officers leaned forward, an admiral from the Conquered Exploration Division, judging by her insignia. What interests us, Cadet, is the methodology you've developed? The ability to establish functional communication with potentially hostile species has significant implications for our expansion efforts. The Drake is intelligent, Thon said simply. All we did was acknowledge that intelligence and work with it rather than against it. Nevertheless, another officer interjected, the results are unprecedented. We would like to formalize this research into an official program, with you and Dr. Carell as joint directors. Thon blinked in surprise. A program? For what purpose? Initially, for training Academy security personnel in non-lethal management of dangerous species. Zorvak explained. Eventually, perhaps, for developing protocols that could be implemented throughout conquered territories. And Sarai? Thon asked. The Drake? Subject SD-17 would remain under Academy jurisdiction. The Commandant said, but with a revised classification as a research partner rather than a specimen. Appropriate habitat modifications would be implemented to ensure its comfort and continued cooperation. The implications were enormous. What had begun as a simple classroom demonstration had evolved into something that could potentially reshape the Concord's approach to extraterrestrial life forms, and, by extension, its view of Deathworlders like humans. I accept, Thon said, on one condition. Zorvak's scaled brow ridge rose. You are in no position to make conditions, Cadet. With respect, sir, I am. Thon met his gaze steadily. Because what we've learned isn't just about training techniques. It's about respect for different forms of intelligence, different evolutionary paths, different ways of being. If this program is going to succeed, that principle has to be central to everything we do. For a moment, the chamber was silent. Then, slowly, Zorvak nodded. Your condition is noted and accepted. Cadet Thon, respect will be the foundation of the program. As Thon left the meeting, she found Lyra waiting in the corridor outside. The Zeltree's crystalline form caught the light differently now. The harsh angles seemed softened somehow. I heard about the new program, Lyra said. Congratulations are in order. Thank you. Thon replied. But it's not just my achievement. Everyone involved has had to reconsider their assumptions about the Drake, about humans, about intelligence itself. Some more than others. Lyra admitted. I was incorrect in my assessment of your capabilities. We were all working with limited information, Thon said generously. Lyra's faceted eyes flickered with what might have been amusement. A diplomatic response. Perhaps that's another Deathworld adaptation worth studying. As they walked together toward the xenobiology department, Thon reflected on how much had changed in just a few months. She had arrived at Jarkor as an outsider, feared and marginalized for her Deathworld origins. Now those same adaptations had opened new possibilities not just for her, but for the entire Conquered. I've been authorized to join the research team, Lyra said as they approached the laboratory where Sarai was recovering. If you're willing to accept a former skeptic as a colleague... Skepticism is valuable, Thon replied. It keeps us honest. Besides, Sarai seems to like you. As if summoned by her name, the Drake looked up as they entered the laboratory. Her scales rippled with the now familiar pattern of recognition. But this time the display included both Thon and Lyra, a clear indication that the Drake had expanded her circle of trust. Remarkable, Lyra murmured. She genuinely recognizes individuals. And remembers how they've treated her. Thon added, Intelligence comes in many forms, if we're willing to see it. As she approached the containment area, Sarai extended her sensory tendrils in greeting. Thon responded with the hand gesture they had developed together, and the Drake's scales shifted to the calm blue-gray of contentment. In that moment, surrounded by beings from worlds so different from her own, Thon felt a profound sense of belonging. Her Deathworld origins, once a barrier, had become a bridge, not just between herself and the Academy, but between different understandings of life itself. "So," Lyra asked, "what's next for the program?" Thon smiled as Sarai settled comfortably into the new enrichment features that had been added to her habitat. "We keep learning from each other. All of us." The Syraxian drake tilted her head, sensory pits dilating in what Thon had come to recognize as curiosity, a predator transformed into a partner, a feared enemy become an unexpected ally. Perhaps, Thon thought, that transformation offered a template for something larger. A conquered where difference was valued rather than feared, where even the most alien perspectives could find common ground. It was, she decided, a future worth building, one careful connection at a time.